You are now watching SWSHEnergy PTCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to SWSHEnergy PTCG. Today we're going to be covering over my top decks for the Players Cup 3. Now, I've tirelessly been working on these decks for the past couple weeks, month, whatever, playing these decks through the Players Cup qualifiers, and these are kind of where I'm settling down on the finals lists. Maybe change a couple cards here or there, but nothing personally at this point. These are all my current lists as of March 8th, 2021. So really giving you the most up-to-date current. I'm literally filming this video on the day of to give you even more of a current take. The Players Cup 3 qualifiers are happening in a next couple weeks. So seeing if you can go from the top 128, 256 of your region to the top 4 of your region go to the global finals. So lots of great information here. I'm going to be featuring Centiskorch VMAX, Eternatus VMAX, Zacian ADP, and Pikarom. So those are my 4 top picks right now. That's not to say that I'm necessarily going to pick those decks. A lot can change within a day, an hour, a minute. But right now, these are my current top decks, and I try to be as honest as possible when it comes to this channel, giving you is all my own personal deck list, everything that I've tried. So hopefully you get a chance to try out these decks, even if you're not playing in the Players Cup or didn't qualify. All of these are great decks, not just because they're for the Players Cup, means that you can't play them. So all the lists are in the description below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to the channel. And I do want to let you know I just recently launched channel memberships, so feel free to join. There's many tiers where you can get something like just supporting me as a content creator for a low denomination a month, or you could get access to my free deck list on my Discord, all of my own personal deck lists, stuff like that, and also group coaching packages. So be sure to click out that join membership. If you can't, that's cool. If you can, that's awesome. All right, I don't want to ramble on too much, so let's check out these decks. So starting off with my personal favorite deck, and again, I do want to let you know these decks are not in any particular order. I'm not necessarily ranking any deck over another deck. I think all of these decks are viable in their own different way. So Eternatus VMAX is a hard-hitting Pokemon doing 270 damage with its Dread and attack for most attacks. This deck is extremely versatile, because you can kind of switch it up into a single prize card deck with Spiritomb and Yveltal if you really need to. That really helps secure random matchups like the Mad Party matchups. And the fact that now Blacephalon is now turning into Cresaphalon more cases than not, this deck actually has an extremely positive matchup against that, because they do feature 2 prize card and 3 prize card Pokemon like Cramorant V and Reshiram Charizard GX. So where does this deck really fail, you might ask? Well, I know for certain when I played in the GG Tour event, which is the last best 2 out of 3 event I played, I was able to make top 8 with a top record, only losing to a Colossal deck and only losing to Pikarom and a Decidueye. So I took 3 losses throughout the entire tournament, which is great. 1 phase 1, 1 phase 2, and 1 in phase 3. Which would be top 8s. So I got a little bit unlucky against Pikarom. Normally Pikarom's quite a favorable matchup. I played against Daniel Davila, one of the best players in the entire game, and he got a little bit lucky with his Crushing Hammer heads. I got a little bit unlucky with attaching energies with Power Accelerator, so that's how that went. This deck will boast favorable matchups against Pikarom, ADP Zacian, Turbo Zacian, Blacephalon, Mad Party, and the list goes on and on. It also has an even mirror match and has a slightly favorable Centiskorch VMAX matchup. So overall, this deck has the best matchup spread in the game, but I am worried that Luke Metal or Zamazenta in general, along with Decigoons and just random fighting type decks, can absolutely take this deck down. So this would really be, this is the case of, this is the best deck in the format. There's no question asking that, or going around that. No one's going to counter that. It has the most results any given week on the Limitless platform, has the highest CP per person. This deck is clearly the best deck in format. If you have the cards, play this deck, as long as you avoid those poor matchups and play it correctly. If you want to learn how to play it, I featured countless hours on my channel on how to play Eternatus. Countless, like I have videos of me playing the deck in tournaments, stuff like that. Eternatus VMAX is quite easy to play. It's quite difficult to master. So I think this deck is amazing. I'm just more worried about how the format's going to shape up. I might just choose this deck in this current list. I may cut an Yveltal or or a Spiritomb. I'm debating if I want to add Sableye V in here to use Load Search to get to get back my Crushing Hammers, to use against Desigoons and Luke Metal. I mean, there's a lot of strategies that I'm kind of thinking about for like 1 or 2 cards, but this list I think is 58 out of 60 perfect. I've had a lot of people ask, why do you play 4 Yveltal? Yveltal is so you got a free retreat into Eternatus V, so it's an extension of Eternatus V. Anytime you go second and go Eternatus V Power Accelerator and attach another energy, as long as you're playing against a matchup that is not Desigoons, Luke Metal, or Colossal VMAX, you're usually winning those games, which is just absolutely huge. It's ridiculously overpowered. So we're going to see exactly if I decide to go with a deck like this. I think that Eternatus VMAX totally fits the cap of, as long as you avoid the poor matchups, you're fine. And every single deck's going to have poor matchups. I just need to make sure that I'm not going to run into a field of Luke Metal, Desigoons, and Colossal V before I pull the trigger on this. And a lot of other players want to play Eternatus VMAX too, so I want to make sure that it's not a trap. It seems almost too good to be true to play this deck, but you don't want to fall into a trap. I think this deck's amazing though on its own. Okay, moving on here to Centiskorch VMAX. This deck is very similar to Eternatus VMAX, where you're packing that huge numbers punch, but I do think that this deck is a little bit different because where Eternatus fails to Desigoons and Luke Metal more often than not, Centiskorch calls those its favorite matchups. So what makes Centiskorch different than Eternatus, you might be wondering? Well, this deck has a positive matchup against Zacian ADP, has a positive matchup against Turbo Zacian, has a positive matchup against Luke Metal, Desigoons. That's really where I think things start to fall apart a little bit. I'd say the Pikarom matchup is slightly unfavorable, especially considering there's no Bird Keeper in this deck. I know that Thomas, Brophy, and Cashman have both been putting Bird Keeper to beat Pikarom in their decks from time to time. And it's one of those cards where Pikarom's going down, but Pikarom, when it goes down enough, it can come up again, if that makes sense. There's not too often that a deck pops out of the metagame when it was previously the best deck in formats. So something like Centiskorch VMAX, really, it's going to die to its own inconsistency. I've said in a few of my videos that Welder is literally energy acceleration hop, and I'm not wrong. I'm literally 100,000% correct on that. So sure, Volcanion using Flare Starter and attaching a couple energies with Welder is great, but it's really the turns that suck is when you can't play something like a Dedenne, or when you can't play a Professor's Research and you have to put that Dedenne GX down on your bench, or you might not even have the bench space because you can't get a scoop up net for your Jirachi. This deck really just focuses on attaching fire energies to the correct attacker, kind of like a stage 1 version of Crucephalon. All the Welder decks are virtually the same. They run off the same Jirachi engine, grabbing things like Welder and scoop up nets and putting Zigzagoon damage down. There's a lot of tricks. There's just not enough of a consistency backbone for me to instantly flock to this deck. Do I think this deck has a better matchup spread than Eternatus? No, but it might have a better matchup spread for the Players' Cup 3 depending on how things turn out. Zacian ADP gaining Rusted Sword really flipped the metagame on its head, and I think the metagame will only develop more and more each week rapidly as more and more players test for a prestigious event. A lot of top players in the game don't necessarily think that the metagame changes as often as other people do because we don't have very many prestigious events. We only got a handful of the GG Tour, Chill TCG events, and we got Players' Cup. But beyond that, a lot of the events are smaller, like the Hegsters events and the E&Ds and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where the events are smaller, so people aren't necessarily going to be playing their absolute best decks. They're not preparing like there's a $5,000 prize on the line or $2,000 worth of prizes on the line. So it's really one of those more difficult things to determine. So Centiskorch VMAX I think is amazing. You just gotta see if the metagame's shaping up that it's gonna be more Zacian based or Desigoons based, or like it's still, this deck can still handle, it's more of a middle ground deck, and if you hit into Pikarom or an Eternatus, sure, you could win those games. You're just going to be slightly unfavored, and it seems ever so slightly, because when this deck pops off and hits a reset stamp, most decks just have no answer to it. I mean, there's a reason why Thomas and Cash have been seeing so much success. It's just Centiskorch is an inherently powerful deck, and they discovered that earlier than most. So I think this deck's awesome. I'm just worried about its consistency issues. I think decks like Eternatus are a little bit more streamlined, hit success. A lot of it, the difference between my choice of playing Etern and Centiskorch are going to be matchup based. ADP is a deck that I said that I would never play in a tournament, just because I don't necessarily think that there's a high skill cap when it comes to it, but Rusted Sword kind of took my idea of that and threw that all away. I think ADP-zation might be the most like middle of the road deck, and its matchup spread might have actually increased over Eternatus. So I might be wrong with Eternatus in my Eternatus mindset where I say it has the best matchup spread compared to every other deck, because Rusted Sword affected the metagame a lot more than we ever thought it did. This deck has a difficult Eternatus matchup sometimes, because Eternatus can just run through your Pokemon one by one. There's no big charm to protect your ADP, etc., etc. But with the inclusion of Mawile GX and a second Mawile GX into the deck, I think it might actually be a little bit different, because now once my ADP does fall to an Eternatus VMAX after I use Altered Creation GX, which will happen most games, now I'm just a Metal Saucer, an Energy, and a Bosss away from really just jumping back into the game. If I could pull that off twice, I just win. And sometimes Eternatus can stumble, so I think that this deck might have a slightly better matchup than I thought against Eternatus. Now, I do find that it fails to Centiskorch significantly. Like during my Players Cup run, I ran into 11 ADP decks. I was able to beat 10 of them with Centiskorch, and I lost to one. Now, the issue is with that is I got a really poor hand in the last one. I think it was one of my last keys as well, and it just felt bad. Like the Centiskorch deck usually just tears this up, and Rusted Sword isn't really going to change that. You might be like, yo, Zach, I know you were talking about like how ADP can use Altered Creation. Rusted Sword's going to do another 30. That means Zacian's hitting for 290. What about when you went for the Leon play against Centiskorch VMAX? And to me, I'm just like, it's not going to happen really. I don't necessarily feel like Leon's going to find its way back into this deck. So kind of going over this list, because it was a little bit different than most. A lot of lists run 2 or 3 copies of Dedenne GX nowadays in Zacian ADP. I decided to change that by including 4 copies of Cherish Ball, so I have a better chance of getting out my ADP. I can Mawile GX when I want, and I have a lower chance of starting with Dedenne GX with the same kind of grabability as 3 copies would. I also included an extra water energy. I know a lot of lists run 3, but especially some of the players who are pushing this deck to its limits, such as Isaiah Bradner, sometimes it'll be like 2 is enough. I don't necessarily agree with that, especially if we're trying to just get off Altered Creation. This deck only needs to get off Altered Creation in most games in order to win, so having a 3rd water energy kind of coats that a little bit more. But yeah, play within your limits. If you think 2 is fine, that's fine. Hopefully you don't get bit by variants. But beyond that, it's really like the Cherish Ball, Dedenne, and the Mawile count that are making this list unique to my own. I think that this seems like the correct path to be going on when it comes to the Players Cup 3. I have considered adding in Crushing Hammers. I don't know if Crushing Hammers Mawile is enough to beat the Eternatus matchup. However, Crushing Hammers just seems very good against Eternatus in general, so that it is something that I will test beforehand. And if I do update it, I mean, I do feel like I post a lot of like the top decks on my channel, but I do want to let you know that my channel is a welcoming place, especially for the top decks. So if I need to update a deck list or something like that, I'm going to update it and I'm going to showcase it to you. And again, and all my channel members get access to all my personal deck lists if they pay for the deck list tier. So if you haven't considered that, feel free to consider it. It would help me out as a content creator, and it would definitely help you out as a player getting access to my top lists. I'm also a pretty open person, so I'd probably be willing to chat a little bit about it via message or something like that. And again, I don't know, it's just one of those things where I think that this list is very good going into the Players Cup 3, so be sure to give it a try. ADP-zation with Rusted Sword really just changed up the metagame, allowing you to kind of leap over these tag team decks, and I really like how this deck has you're not going to necessarily be worried about hitting a Decidueye. You're not necessarily going to be worried about hitting a lot of decks. I really just think that Centiskorch is a poor matchup, and ADP-zation just might be a better deck to play than most people think. And my last pick is going to be Pikarom, and it's definitely not going to be in last place. I think Pikarom always holds a special spot in my heart after I was able to win the Players' Cup 2. Now, I have a lot of accomplishments in the game. The Players' Cup 2 is obviously my most interesting one because it's one of the only like pandemic spin-off events compared to a regionals or an internationals. However, the numbers look like there was over 10,000 players who participated in the qualifying period. So for me to come first over 10,000, it's always going to be like Pikarom got me there. And it really pushes the limits of a deck like this. I know my group, we really worked on adding the Mewtwo and Mew GX, Gabriel Smart, and us really thought that it was a great addition to the deck. It still continues to be the standard version of this deck. Now, the only real difference that I've changed for this deck is I've added in a Big Charm, and I've added in an additional copy of Yell Grunt. Those are going to come to cost at other things in the deck. But not really by much. I think that this deck can really handle those. You need the Yell Grunt Crushing Hammer package to beat Eternatus. I think this deck has a favorable Scorch matchup. Now, you got to watch out for the ADP matchup because they do have Rusted Sword. Maybe the extra disruption is going to be very helpful against it. Maybe the Big Charm is going to allow you to survive a hit comparatively to before. But I think that a deck like this is quite strong in our current meta game. And as much as I placed it lower in my top 10 deck video, doesn't necessarily mean that I can't consider it for the Players' Cup. I think that Pikarom would be more of a middle ground approach. I think that as a player who has mastered this deck, I think that I can play this deck. I can outplay opponents with this deck is probably the best way to put it. And I think that that's a really defining aspect. With Eternatus, I can play the deck perfectly. I can't really outplay people with Eternatus. There's not too many opportunities. Here I have sequencing opportunities between Team Yell Grunt, Reset Stamp, Tandem Shock, Tag Bolt GX. Like, I can plan out multi-dimensional moves, turns in advance that can really just solidify my board state and put me in a winning spot. Not many other decks offer this level of disruption and power and variety of attacks. So this is really like, this is the last remaining Mewtwo deck if you think about it. It's not like a Mewtwo deck, but Mewtwo Lightning died out, Mewtwo Welder died out, and then you have this deck that's just kind of like popping up because it's able to survive against most things. I don't know if that speaks to a testament of the deck or a testament to the player, but I think that Pikarom's a lot better than we think. I don't necessarily love its matchup spread, but I do feel like in most situations I'm able to play better than my opponents. And as long as I focus in on my games, I know that I have a shot in most matchups. Now, I am worried still because a deck like this, when I say I have a shot in most matchups, I don't think Zigzagoons is a great kind of matchup. And that's something that I could just hit and lose. I have a better chance with Eternatus. So maybe Eternatus spiritually became the new Pikarom somewhere in the process, and I'm still trying to figure that out. It's one of those things where, again, I love the comeback potential of this deck. If you feel like you ever just like lose games because your opponent draws better, try Pikarom and try playing it perfectly, and you'll see otherwise. Same thing with Eternatus. I've covered hours upon hours. I have my entire Players' Cup 2 global finals run up on the channel where I commentate and give expert tips on how to play this deck. So I don't want to go too much more into detail with what Pikarom can do because I have it everywhere else on my channel, and I think it's much better to show than just say here. So I don't know. I think Pikarom's I'm gonna have to tear this one off of myself unless I'm just gonna play it. So I think it's a really good deck. Regardless, maybe not as well positioned as it always has been, but as the metagame rapidly changes, you never know when Pikarom is going to be the best positioned deck again. And there we have it, peeps. Those are my top decks for the Players' Cup 3. Hopefully my championship win allows me to kind of have a deep insight into the game. I've been kind of no-life grinding Pokemon for the past couple months. I haven't necessarily been playing in many of the weekly tournaments on Limitless, but I have been having those late-night Discord calls with my testing partners and really just working on these decks, refining them till they get to this point. So hopefully these allow you to advance as far as possible during the qualifiers. I'm playing in the North American qualifier myself, so if I hit one of you, hopefully it's a great game. Hopefully you guys can take some advice. I would never mislead anyone when it comes to a deck list or anything like that. I really just want to help the community grow at this point, and hopefully you could see throughout the channel that I've just been as straight up as honest as possible with my lists. So this video is me at my absolute brutally honest, and I think that these are the top 4 decks for the Players Cup 3. If you want to know why your deck didn't make the cuts, let me know. I'll give you some detailed notes, because I try to keep pretty I try to keep notes on every single deck in the format, at least the ones that I think are viable. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, don't forget to hit subscribe. Totally appreciate it. We're so close to getting to 1,500, and it just seems like a couple weeks ago we were at 1,000. So the fact that we've grown our channel from 1,000 to 1,500 so quick is ridiculous to me. One of the fastest growing channels on Pokemon YouTube. So I appreciate all of the help from everyone and all of the support. So be sure to check out the next slide where I kind of go over all the channel members. If you haven't thought of that already, maybe the next slide you want to see your name on there. We'll see. Anyways, I gotta go do some errands, so have yourself a great one, and we'll catch up with y'all real soon. Peace out. I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's been supporting my channel by becoming a channel member. So for those of you who don't know, I recently launched channel membership on my channel, where I have 3 tiers at this time of different things. So you could support my channel, you could get access to all my deck lists, or there's a group coaching package. You can just click on the join below on desktop, and it will show you exactly what's going on about what each level does. So it's been less than a week, and we already have Ali Plays Pokemon, Xenon TCG, and Gabe Smart, who have helped support my channel. So if you want to support the channel, you can become a member today. I do truly appreciate everyone who's been supporting the channel, either by watching it, but if you want to do a little bit more for the channel, and if it would not be a financial burden to you, feel free to do so, because all of that goes back into creating more and more content and upgrading my gear and stuff like that. So I totally appreciate all the support from these 3 wonderful members, and it means the world to me that you support my channel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. If you haven't already, it'd mean the world to me if you could subscribe to help support me as a content creator. Thanks again, and have yourself a great one.